The University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee is an amalgamation of old and new buildings. As a student, I had always wondered how UWM came to possess these buildings, and what the story behind them was. In particular, these red brick buildings always stood out to me. This area of campus feels more peaceful and down to earth compared to UWM's usual urban university feeling. UWM purchased these buildings from Milwaukee-Downer Female College when they merged with Lawrence College in Appleton. Throughout this documentary, we will explore each building's origin and how UWM still utilizes them to this day. But before we do that, we'll need to start from the beginning. This is Cale Byrne reporting for the UWM Post. Milwaukee-Downer College was actually the result of a merger between two other institutions, Milwaukee Female College and the Wisconsin Female College in Fox Lake. The story of Milwaukee Female College begins in 1848. Wisconsin had just achieved statehood on May 29th, and the city of Milwaukee was established 2 years prior. Reverend William Leonard Parsons was a minister from Aurora, Illinois. He came to Milwaukee to preach a sermon before the newly established Free Congregational Society in a building that would eventually become the Grand Avenue Church. On August 18th, the Reverend's wife Lucy Seymour Parsons announced that she would open a new seminary high school for young ladies nearby the church. Prior to this endeavor, Miss Parsons had years of teaching and administrative experience from being a schoolmistress in upstate New York. The Milwaukee Female Seminary opened on September 14, 1848. The school is held in a two-story building built behind the church. Across the street, there was a building which served as the Parsons family residence as well as a boarding building for the students who attended the school. In April of 1850, Catherine Beecher, an educator who developed a new way to educate women at a collegiate level, visited Milwaukee Female Seminary. Catherine Beecher was actually the older sister of Harriet Beecher Stowe, the famous author of Uncle Tom's Cabin. Catherine Beecher had a unique philosophy for the time. She believed that childcare, school teaching, nursing, and homemaking were the careers that best suited women, and that they should be educated in these careers at a collegiate level. Women still had a ways to go before they would break into male-dominated fields, but the Great Beecher Plan was the beginning of women receiving a college-level education, and it was adopted in many schools across the Midwest. She reorganized the school into a teacher training school, and it was renamed Milwaukee Normal Institute and High School. Beecher was never a full staff member, but more of a consultant overseeing the implementation of her plan within the school. On January 27, 1852, several of the teachers along with local educators organized into the Ladies' Educational Society of Milwaukee to raise money for a bigger building for the school. That spring, they purchased a plot of land about 1/3 of an acre on the southeast corner of Milwaukee and Juneau. The cornerstone was laid in June of 1852. In the fall, the school was moved into the new Gothic-style building recently erected at the site. The new building had a large study hall for lectures, adorned with statues along the walls. The next year, the name was changed to Milwaukee Female College. Miss Parsons did not make the move with the college, and one of the teachers, Mary Mortimer, took over as principal. In 1860, they added a 2-story dorm building with a fancy parlor. In 1871, Mary Mortimer entrusted the presidency to two assistants, Helen Brace and Helen Phillips. When they took over, they added new facilities for art and music. In 1874, Charles Farrar took over as principal, and the institution was renamed Milwaukee College. Under Charles Farrar's leadership, they added a 3rd story to the dorms with a new natural history room, gymnasium, and a physics laboratory. In 1875, Hiram Barber presented a telescope to Milwaukee College, manufactured by the famous American telescope maker Alvin Clark and Sons. The college used this equipment to open a new observatory later that year. In 1878, they also added a library and named it the Mortimer Memorial Library after Mary Mortimer. There was also a separate room in the library for the ladies' art and science class. In 1886, they expanded the dormitory by 30 rooms, but failed to meet the expected enrollment. The other predecessor, Wisconsin Female College, began in 1854 when the newly established Wisconsin Baptist Education Society was looking for land to build schools for the young people in their denomination. They were offered a 20-acre site in Beaver Dam, along with $15,000 for its establishment, which they accepted and turned into a men's college called Wayland Academy, which still exists to this day. They were also offered a site in Fox Lake with $5,000 for its establishment, which they accepted and turned into the Wisconsin Female College. An architect named T.G. Eggleston designed the building. He began work early in the spring, and on July 4, 1855, the cornerstone was laid. On October 8, 1856, the college opened its doors to 58 students. The main building had a dining room, a parlor, and an art studio. And here is what one of the dorms would have looked like. By 1857, the student body had doubled, and the school was thriving. However, Wayland Academy's construction ended up costing more than anticipated. So in 1857, the Wisconsin Baptist Education Society withdrew their support from Wisconsin Female College, and support for the college fell on the Fox Lake community. In 1864, Judge Jason Downer became acquainted with Wisconsin Female College and became president of their board of trustees to invest in the higher education of women. In 1866, Judge Downer gave the college $9,500 toward the construction of a new building that would house a chapel and library. On July 5, 1870, the new building was dedicated as Downer Hall in his name. Judge Jason Downer died on August 27, 1883, at his home in Milwaukee. In February of 1889, the Wisconsin Female College was renamed to Downer College in Judge Downer's honor. In September of 1891, Ellen C. Sabin took over as president of Downer College, and in June of 1892, she wrote her first annual report to the trustees, asking for a new science building and permanent funding for their library. It just so happens that Milwaukee College was looking for a new president, and they visited Downer College to interview Ellen Sabin. She was offered the presidency of Milwaukee College, but instead she suggested amalgamating the two schools. Downer College moved into the current Milwaukee College buildings for the school year of 1895. The old Fox Lake buildings were leased to Mr. J.R. Pratt to create a Bible Institute. They would later become the Peerless Hotel and Sanatorium. In January of 1910, the Peerless Hotel and Sanatorium was destroyed by a fire. On June 22, 1897, Ellen Sabin sent a letter to the Milwaukee-Downer College trustees, sharing her dismay about having to use the old Milwaukee College buildings. The continuance of a school in this building is a deplorable thing. The need of new buildings cannot be put too strongly. The loss of energy in overcoming or enduring the inconveniences we experience is appalling. The continued usefulness, the very existence of the college, demands that it find more desirable quarters before the year September 1898 opens. Therefore, they decided to find a new site and erect new buildings to hold the combined colleges. A 10-acre site on Downer Avenue was purchased for $35,000 for the construction of new buildings. This plot of land was originally a dairy farm owned by Guido Pfister, a leather tanner who immigrated from Germany. Guido Pfister passed away in 1889, and this plot of land was later sold to Milwaukee-Downer College in 1896. His son, Charles Pfister, would eventually go on to establish the Pfister Hotel, which is one of Milwaukee's oldest hotels. The meeting of the Board of Trustees on February 17, 1897, announced that plans had been received from 7 architects for the new buildings for the college, and on March 4th, the building committee made its selection of the winning design, submitted by Howland Russell and Alexander Eschweiler in collaboration. Eschweiler and Russell best pleased the committee, combining artistic architectural effects with adaptation to the grounds and compliance with the requirements and the limitation of cost. A deal was struck between the 2 architects, where they would take turns designing each building. They would be built in the English domestic Gothic style, out of red sandstone, St. Louis red pressed brick, decorated terracotta for the bays and oriels, and slate roofing. The old school building on Milwaukee Street was not sold and remained college property until December of 1905. It then became the College Hotel, later called the Carlton Hotel. It was demolished in 1963. The instruction building was named Merrill Hall, after William P. Merrill, who gave $10,000 for the construction of the building. The cornerstone was laid on June 16, 1898.
My name is Sabrina Fuller-Moniz. I'm an Administrative Assistant 3 for the Department of Communication, and also the building chair for the Downer buildings. That includes Holton Hall, Merrill Hall, Johnston Hall, the Green Hall, and also the Green Museum. In Merrill Hall, that is primarily classrooms. From the third and the second floor are majority classrooms and some communication department offices. The first floor of Merrill houses the Electoquity Institute, which includes Native American Studies Department. And then the basement floor, again, has more classrooms. Right now we're in the main hallway of Merrill Hall that starts out at the main entrance. As you can see, this maintains the Gothic style of architecture as with the rest of the buildings. One really interesting piece of iconography in these stairwells are the featuring of the Sacred Heart in the woodwork on the hand railings. This stairwell, as well as some of the other stairwells in Johnston and Holton, are some of the oldest, if not the oldest, on campus.
We'll begin with the basement. In 1900, Mr. James Bryden provided the funding for 2 bowling alleys that were installed in the basement. In the spring of 1901, the college announced that they would also add domestic science classes, which would be housed in 2 rooms of the basement. These 2 rooms would later be renovated in 1937 to be used by the city students as a lunchroom. As a result of these renovations, the bowling alleys were moved to the basement of Johnston Hall. In 1942, the bowling alleys were moved again to the basement of Green Hall until they were removed by UWM in 1964. When UWM acquired Merrill Hall, the back portion of the basement was used as the IT help desk.
This used to be the location of the IT help desk, which serviced the entire campus for all technological needs, including classroom services, as well as other computer issues.
I'm Mike Allen, a professor in the Department of Communication. Media Lab was in the bottom of Merrill on the little annex that extends out the back on the ground floor. And that was one of those where they had just basically equipment to go in and you could sign out and check out kind of thing. Well, when I first got here, it was a media lab and it was also it was a computer lab. Under the old, God, those were about as dumb a computers as you could. Those are 1980s, very dumb computers hooked up to the mainframe with line printers. I mean, this is something out of an old James Bond movie kind of thing. They had a media lab there, which had cameras that you could check out, and we're talking the old I don't know if it was VHS. They may have been reel-to-reel. They were either reel-to-reel or VHS, where you had cameras literally that were shoulder-mounted, and people they were like in the third. Front. Yeah, they were in the third, and if you had a key, you could go in and check them out and do that.
Nowadays, the IT help desk can be found in Bolton Hall. The first floor had classrooms for French, German, Spanish, and sociology. The first floor also held the entrance to the chapel, which was adorned with several statues taken from Milwaukee College. 2 of them were named Sophocles and Aeschines. Students of Milwaukee-Downer College would later nickname them Mr. and Mrs. Downer. Here you can see Sophocles, along with a Tiffany clock in front of the chapel entrance. This clock was placed by Kate Flanders Duria in memory of her father Walter Flanders, the first treasurer of Milwaukee Female College. It was named the Flanders Clock.
The most, I would say, important room in Merrill Hall was what is now known as Merrill 131. That is the large lecture hall, the only large lecture hall in Merrill. It also served as the chapel, meeting space, and graduation area back when it was a women's seminary, even going back as far as when it was Milwaukee-Downer College.
Originally, when I came here, there was a big stage, elevated stage, and then there was actually a pulpit that you actually climbed to lecture out of. I went up in the pulpit and was lecturing from the pulpit. That's removed. I mean, they have now big screens on the back of the walls, now big screens, and then they have a console at the front, and they replaced all the chairs, so it looks more like a giant lecture hall, although it's got really big stained glass windows on the side, which is kind of an interesting combination.
Back when this was the Milwaukee-Downer College, this room here was the largest lecture hall on campus. This also served as kind of the main meeting space for everybody at the university, including a chapel. This plaque here shows the original dedication of this particular building, or this part of the building in Merrill Hall, showing its founding in 1898.
When the chapel was originally built, there was a balcony above the back of the chapel, which was accessible on the second floor. Nowadays, it is used as a projector room.
Right now, we are in the Merrill 131 projector room. This room is primarily used just to hold the projector. And other than that, it really hasn't been used since everything was updated to digital.
There is also an attic space above the chapel that can be accessed on the third floor, if you have the right keys. The second floor was occupied by English, psychology, educational psychology, occupational therapy, and political science classes.
In Merrill Hall, between each of the classrooms are observation rooms that include one-way mirrors on each side, as well as a PA system. These are primarily used for teaching evaluations, so you can pretty covertly watch classes being taught during session without impeding on the class itself. It makes it a little bit easier for senior faculty member to do evaluations of both TAs as well as other faculty members, because there's not as much pressure having an observer in the room who is evaluating you.
The classrooms across the way, they wanted to make them into what we call labs. So they took the two classrooms and cut the center out of each of the two classrooms to put in a control room so we could put in cameras to record things. That was because we were using the labs to run experiments and do observation and collect data. That way you could you could sit in the control room and you could run two cameras. We had sets of cameras. So there were two sets of controls for recording, one for this room, one for this room. And so you had a one-way mirror and microphones where you could basically listen in, and we could hit cameras and record. It was also great teaching because we could use it for public speaking. We could record speeches. Originally, we would run a class and we would split the class in half and record half the class here and half the class there. That meant we could give double the number of speeches in a class, because instead of having to listen to 20 speeches, they only had to listen to 10. So we could actually increase the number of assignments. And then it was easy because you had them all recorded, so you could grade off the recordings. And when students didn't like their grades, they say, well, if there was an argument about whether or not something was graded effectively, whether they'd performed a behavior they needed to perform, you had a videotape of it you could go back to. And students also were required to supply their own videotape. So we recorded the videotape of their speech on their videotape, and we gave them back their videotape, so they had to go watch their speech and provide comments on what they were doing correctly. So it was really an effective tool. Of course, those days are long since. The control rooms now are not control rooms; they're just used for storage. I mean, eventually, I think I'm assuming they'll remove the storage. They'll remove them, and they'll become part of the classroom. but that would require a lot of money. So I doubt that's not going to happen anytime soon.
At the east end of the second floor, the first library was established by Mrs. Horace A.J. Upham. It was named the Green Memorial Library in honor of her mother, Elizabeth L. Green, one of the original trustees of Milwaukee Female College. It held about 4,000 volumes. An adjacent room was used for the art library, assembled by the ladies' art and science class. The third floor of Merrill Hall housed labs for chemistry, physics, and biology, as well as an art studio and a museum of historical and scientific artifacts, presumably taken from Milwaukee College's collection.
And there are dead spaces, spaces that are kind of blocked off or hidden. For example, the fourth floor, we call it the fourth floor, and there's not really a fourth floor, but there's an annex up at the top of kind of like the little, in the center. You go up the stairway, there's a block there, and behind it, there supposedly is like a little attic maintenance space.
Here's the doorway into the very not well-known fourth floor of Merrill Hall. It has been sealed off to the public and to most of the faculty members and staff of the university for quite a few decades.
We were not able to find any information on what the fourth and fifth floors were used for, but they have been closed to the public for decades. However, we were able to get an exclusive tour. Behind that locked door is a small room with 3 more doors. The door on the left leads to an unfinished room with a walkway leading to a window. The door on the right leads to a room full of HVAC equipment for the building. The door in the middle is a small staircase leading up to the 5th floor, which is just an unfinished room with a walkway. There is a ladder that leads up to the roof, but we weren't allowed up there. At one end of the walkway is another unfinished room with a window. At the other end is a mysterious door. But before I show you what's behind that door, I'll have to show you something else first. On the east wing of Merrill Hall, there's a beautiful wooden staircase that connects each floor. When you get to the top, you'll find that people have carved their name into the wood.
Right now we are in the stairway of the spire in Johnston Hall. This is the tallest point of all the buildings, and it is the primary connector of Merrill and Johnston Hall, as well as the Green Hall. Some of the names, as you can see, I've been here for 3 years, and this is a space that is new to me. You can see that many people have etched their names, both on this post as well as the windowsill. And it seems like there are some newer ones. We have 2018 from Tyra, who wrote Freedom. We've got some love connections here for A&S. We have TM from fall of 2006. We have fall 2009, 2021. I'll pretend not to see the 2024 one. And I think the oldest one that we have here is this spring of 1987.
Now this seems like the top of the staircase, but if you look at the tower from the outside, you will see a domed roof and arched windows. So there's clearly one more level above us. But what kind of room would have a domed roof? If you guessed an observatory, you'd be right. It's no longer functional, but you can still see the large circular gear that would have rotated the observatory's roof. Here are the views from each window. However, in the telescope's place, there's a chimney. So what happened to the telescope? Well, In 1875, Hiram Barber presented a telescope to Milwaukee College manufactured by the famous American telescope maker Alvin Clark and Sons, which they used to open an observatory. After the merger, in 1904, the observatory in Merrill Hall was opened. It was equipped with the telescope and the instruments originally given to Milwaukee College. The telescope was purchased by UWM in 1964. Because of its value and fear for its security, it was removed from the Merrill Hall Observatory in 1965. According to an essay we found on Merrill Hall's history, the telescope was stored in the Physics and Engineering building in the 70s. The Smithsonian Institution wanted the school to donate the telescope to them because they didn't have a complete Alvin Clark telescope from 1870. Nowadays, it is stored in a display case at the American Geographical Society Library on the third floor of UWM's Golda Meir Library. Holton Hall was built as the dormitory for seminary students. It was named after Edward D. Holton, one of the original trustees for Milwaukee Female College. Holton Hall also served as the main entrance to the college for any visitors, so it was the fanciest place on campus at the time. The drawing room and parlors were furnished with English furniture, imported rugs, and rare works of art given to the college by the Chapman family, a family that would continue to give many generous gifts.
Holton is another one of the classroom buildings. Now it houses the College of Letters and Sciences, and College of Letters and Sciences now is the largest college at UWM. That location was the main entryway into the college at the time, and since it has kind of maintained its Gothic architecture in that main entryway, as well as the lounge area, it is kind of, it really does take you back to the late turn of the century 1800s era.
My name is Ann Dredge, and I'm the executive assistant to the Dean of Letters and Science at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I'm also a building manager, so that means that I walk around and make sure that the building's not falling apart, or if there's something wrong, I report it. I make sure it gets cleaned up or it is repaired. I think one of my favorite parts of this building, of Holton, is the first floor meeting area, because that is like the least messed with. Right, the state, because I think it's designated as a historical or a hysterical room. So they did a pretty okay renovation of it. And then what I love is the entrance to the Holton when you enter from the little quad area, because there are two rooms that advisors are in now, but those were where the gentlemen callers would come and sit and wait for their girlfriends, because the men were not allowed in this building. And so the only place they were allowed in was those two rooms, so they would wait. And I don't know, I think it's pretty lovely.
This is the main lobby of the LNS Welcome Center on the first floor of Holton Hall, which is the centralized hub for all of LNS advising. And this room has kind of been maintained as a historic replica of kind of what you would have expected to see about 50 to 100 years ago of life at the university, and still maintains a lot of older, more period-specific furniture, as well as kind of giving this cocktail area vibe.
According to a pamphlet that was produced at the time of the drawing room's renovation, recreation of the 1899 atmosphere in the Holton drawing room has been facilitated by the generosity of Lawrence University in lending 3 pieces of the original furnishings which Mrs. T. A. Chapman provided: a desk, matching bookcase, and a round table. None of the other furniture and paintings are original, but style and location are similar to those shown in contemporary photographs. Today, the only original piece of furniture that remains is the bookcase. I'm not sure what happened to the desk and round table. They could have given them back to Lawrence College, or they could have gone into storage. In the west wing of Holton, the Alumni Hall was established. It was also used as the recital hall. Kate Flanders Duria also placed a similar Tiffany clock in the Alumni Hall in memory of her mother, Susan Everett Flanders. The basement of the west wing housed Holton Hall's dining room, and the second floor of the west wing housed Holton Hall's gymnasium, which was completed in 1900. In the 70s, UWM converted it into a sewing lab. Nowadays, it has been renovated into office space and classrooms. There was also a beautiful tapestry hung in Holton Hall, although I'm not sure where it was located. One student, Helen Tyrell, wrote a poem about it for the 1922 yearbook that read, "The shadows of the massive trees, the sunlight sifting through the leaves, the sportsmen mounted, each on horse, they give the chase a setting true, while castle walls complete the view. Those hunters are of weaver's thread, on fiber grass the horses tread, that wounded stag is woven in, as to and fro the shuttles spin, those lovely shadows give but shade, from sunshine that can never fade. That hunter will forever be, astride that steed so wild and free, I strain to hear that loud halloo, forgetting that this bright hour too is but the product of some loom, some weaver long within the tomb. Our tapestry in Holton Hall, familiar to the eyes of all, a treasure rare it would lend grace to any old historic place, worthy of a castle hall, worthy of cathedral wall." Here's what the dormitories would have looked like. Here's one of the conference rooms on the third floor, where you can find an original writing desk from Downer College. In another conference room on the second floor, there's an ornate set of hand-carved wooden furniture. I'm not sure if these pieces are from Downer, but we found something interesting while we were looking through them.
This china hutch probably built, I would say somewhere between 1890, turn of the century, 1900. We've had this and the matching pieces in our conference room for, I don't know, 20, 30 years. And I'm really not sure how long they've been here. But, we have china. We have a setting for at least 20. And I guess at some point they would do dinners and with the silverware and the plates. While we were looking at this hutch, we found 2 plates. Can you get a good look at that? Mm-hmm. That is Albert Hall. That was built in 1907. That no longer exists. That was between Holton Hall and Chapman. And we have a plate, a commemorative plate. Again, this is Merrill Hall, and Merrill was built in 1898, still exists. So thinking that these were commemorative plates that were made for probably the Downer Women's College.
Merrill and Holton Halls were finished and ready for occupancy in September of 1899. Both of the buildings were designed by Eschweiler and Russell in collaboration. The next building to be built was a dormitory for the college students, and it was designed by Eschweiler and finished in 1901. It was called College Hall until June of 1904, when the Board of Trustees voted to name it after their recently deceased president, John T. Johnston. The first floor of Johnston Hall had a beautiful drawing room with hand-carved wooden furniture and a fireplace.
Right now, we're in Johnston Hall. Johnston Hall is one of the three main Downer buildings. This actually used to be a residence hall for the women's seminary back when it was built in the late 1800s. This is a Tudor Revival style architecture. Um, it was this was kind of the main hub of the residence hall with this main stairway. Johnston Hall houses the Department of Linguistics and the Department of Communication. The top floor of Johnston houses the TA offices. Second floor of Johnston is the Communication Department faculty offices. And the first and basement floors are the Department of Linguistics faculty offices, as well as their phonetics lab, in which whenever they do research for the linguistics department, they use those. There's recording equipment as well as sound booths in many of the different rooms in Johnston Hall's basement.
One thing that makes Johnston unique is that the outside of the building is adorned with carvings of dragons and the heads of nuns. Some would call these carvings gargoyles, but the faces are actually called grotesqueries.
So the gargoyles are all original to the building. I don't believe any of them have been recreated. A lot of them, though, have been brought inside, in particular into the Green Museum, into Green Hall to preserve them. But they include iconography from fairy tales and folklore, like mermaids and angels, as well as demons at some point. But some of them also show people who existed at that time, like deans of the college, faculty members, as a little homage to them.
They don't use the water spouts anymore, but if you look on the outside, there's gargoyles and there's dragons. And it used to be in the old days, the water was channeled so it would run out the dragon's mouth during a storm. So you'd see, and there's a water break below.
The third residence hall was called Third Hall. It was designed by Russell and opened in September of 1903. Shortly after, it was renamed McLaren Hall in honor of William McLaren, who was a trustee of Milwaukee-Downer College. Here is what the student lounge looked like, and some of the dorms. McLaren Hall was located where Endaris Hall now stands. In 1904, Miss Horace J. Upham gave the college $10,000 to build a new building to house the library, which was completed in the fall of 1904. The library had since grown to 6,000 volumes. The building was designed by Eschweiler and named the Elizabeth Green Memorial Library after one of the original trustees of Milwaukee College. The old library room on the second floor of Merrill Hall was turned into a periodical reading room.
Green Hall originated and was built with the other four Downer buildings. It started out as the library in the Milwaukee-Downer College. Now it is a teaching space for the occupational therapy and rehabilitation therapy program at UWM as a training space, which actually is kind of ironic because Milwaukee-Downer College was one of the first occupational programs in the whole country. Green Hall used to be our main space that we would hold all of our award ceremonies, big events. The graduate students used to hold their comprom in that room, and it's been a beautiful space for us. Obviously, currently it's being used for by another program, which they're welcome to do so. I hope at some point, though, we get that space back for events because as one of the oldest buildings on campus, it connects people in these buildings and people in our program back to those historical roots. It's nice to centralize yourself in a place and time in history, especially during those kind of big moments like award ceremonies and things like that.
The ceiling of Green Hall is adorned with these beautiful carvings representing music and literature. Each support beam has a stone carving that represents a different subject that was taught at the school.
The green hall is still one of the most beautiful, probably, rooms in the entire complex, and the woodwork is, and the stained glass windows are just still amazing after 125 years. Well, they grossly are in need of maintenance, but that's another. Finding somebody who can do that kind of work is probably next to impossible, given how old they are, and there are very few artisans who could actually do that kind of work anymore. So.
In September of 1905, the powerhouse was completed, containing the heating and lighting plants and the steam laundry. A separate infirmary building was funded by Elizabeth Plankington and opened in March of 1906. The powerhouse and infirmary were both designed by Russell. A new building to house the music department was funded with a $10,000 gift from Mr. and Mrs. Frederick Sevier. The music hall was designed by Eschweiler and completed in February of 1907. It was named Albert Memorial Hall after the Sevier's son, Albert Edward. The building contained 18 practice rooms, 6 studios, and a library. Soon after its completion, 2 arcades connecting it to Holton and McLaren Hall were constructed. These passageways were also used as conservatories for plants. The area enclosed by these buildings became Hawthorne Den, a green space on campus with a sundial and seating. Hawthorne Den also served as an outdoor theater and event space for celebrations like May Day. A new building to house the home economics department was funded with a $10,000 endowment fund from the College Endowment Association. The building was designed by Russell and completed in January of 1908. It was named Kimberly Hall in honor of Helen Cheney Kimberly, who helped establish the home economics department. The new building housed a model laundry, dressing and locker rooms in the basement, a model kitchen, pantry, and dining room, and spacious cookery laboratory on the first floor, and a second floor devoted to clothing, textiles, millinery, basketry, and other crafts. In 1909, plans were underway for a new seminary campus across the street from the college buildings. The estimated cost of these buildings and their furnishings was $155,000. Alice Chapman helped fund the construction, and the main building was named Chapman Hall in her honor. The first story held 6 classrooms, each 18 by 24 feet. The second story held 7 large classrooms and a reading room. The third story had a library and an art room. Chapman Hall also housed a senior lounge and a faculty lounge. The east wing housed the gymnasium, which extended from the basement to the first floor. And a study hall which took up the second and third floor above the gymnasium. The walls were lined with cases for reference books and with lockers for the students. The dormitory was built in a similar style to Holton Hall and named Vogel Hall after Louise Pfister Vogel. The Vogel family had several family members on the board of trustees. The entrance to the dormitory had a beautiful wooden grandfather clock. Directly opposite to the entrance was the main parlor and reception room. The dormitory also had an infirmary, student lounge, and kitchenette. Here's what the dorms looked like. The dormitory was connected to Chapman Hall by an arcade, which also served as a conservatory for plants. Both buildings were designed by Eschweiler and Russell in collaboration and opened in September of 1910.
My name's Pat Riley, and here I am standing in front of what I believe used to be the main entrance of Pierce Hall. It's long since been remodeled and it's no longer an active entrance. But if you'll take a look up, you'll see at one time Pierce used to be Chapman Hall before they actually moved across the street to where Chapman Hall currently is.
When UWM acquired these buildings, they tore down the arcade and built an entirely new extension connecting the buildings on each floor. However, some of the original details of the building still survived.
My name is Pat Riley, and here we are in the column that joins Pierce and Garland. And inside this column, we see the exterior, the original exterior of Garland. And it gives you a sense of what the building was like on the outside before they were joined at the hip, so to speak, by this column that currently provides the elevator and the air handling systems. You can see that this is clearly the exterior as shown by the copper flashings right here that have even turned that nice green that you often see with copper. So it had been exposed for quite a long time before it came inside the building. And you can see how this has been, the masonry was originally set when it was on the exterior of the building. You even see some of the old windows that have now been sealed over to make office space on the inside. My name is Patrick Riley, and we're in the basement of Pierce Hall at UWM. And this is a room that had been used by the behavior analyst people that used to be here in our psychology department. It's a padded room, a rubber room that was used when they were dealing with very fractious autistic kids and whatnot. Right now, it's not in current use. But as you can see, it's not something that really lends itself to being easily remodeled.
Throughout the college's existence, they received several private collections. The largest and most renowned collection received was the Thomas A. Green Geological Collection, which contained about 75,000 specimens of minerals and fossils, especially fossils from the Silurian and Devonian periods. These two pictures show the collection as it was originally displayed in Thomas Green's house. In 1912, Miss Horace J. Upham presented this collection to the college and contributed $10,000 towards the construction of a museum building. The Green Memorial Museum was designed by Eschweiler to be completely fireproof. It was completed in March of 1913. Later, the college would grow the collection to 100,000 specimens. The artifacts in the museum on the third floor of Merrill Hall were also relocated to the new Green Museum.
Between 1888 and 1910, many rich people would become, that was their hobby, to collect plants or fossils, and they had the money and the time to go everywhere, and then they amassed these collections, and what do they do with them? They gave them to us. Thank you very much. So, I used to walk by that building before they restored it, and I kept thinking, God, what a cool old building. And then you could actually see plants, trees growing inside of it. I mean, it was like melting into the ground, and I'm really glad that they restored it. It's a pretty important, pretty amazing collection, right? It's just, yeah. And you can go and see it for free. I mean, that's so crazy. There's actually a museum with fossils on our campus. So I'm standing in the second floor of the Green Memorial Library, also known as the Stahl Center for Jewish Studies. This floor was used for the geological collection. So if you can imagine, the entire floor had oak cases lining the walls and then coming down the center. And then this is where you could come and see this wonderful fossil collection. The windows, the skylights are original. The lights are copies of what used to be here, which I think was a pretty nice touch.
UWM purchased the 75,000 fossils and 13,000 mineral specimens in the Thomas Green Museum collection. The Thomas Green Memorial Museum was opened to the public on February 6, 1970. In 1992, the collection was moved to a new display room in Lapham Hall. According to the website, approximately 5,000 of the 75,000 specimens are displayed in the new room, while the rest of the collection is kept in a climate-controlled room in the basement in a compact shelving unit. The storage room, compact shelving, and displays are all secured with separate keys and an alarm system. The original wooden cabinets from the Green Memorial Museum are owned by the state of Wisconsin and were transferred to the core repository building of the Wisconsin Geological and Natural History Survey in Mount Horeb. They are still used to display rocks, minerals, and fossils, though not green specimens, for all visitors to see at their facility. If UWM were ever able to expand their museum footprint in Lapham or elsewhere, the geologists there have mentioned that they would send them back to be repurposed to their original use.
You know, when UWM became UWM and was no longer the Downer Women's College, this building, because it wasn't ADA compliant, sat for years, pretty much melting into the ground until the director at the time, I think Stacy, and I can't remember Stacy's last name, made it, got the money from the stalls and the Berkowitzes to restore this building. And this is how it became the Stull Center for Jewish Studies.
With a growing number of students in the sciences and the inadequate facilities of Merrill, a new building was certainly needed. After Lucia Briggs became president of the college, plans were made to build a new building that would house all the science departments. In November of 1927, the Milwaukee-Downer College class of 1929 had the old cornerstone of the Wisconsin Female College building in Fox Lake dug up and brought to Milwaukee to be laid with the new cornerstone of the new Science Hall. The new building was named the Ellen C. Sabin Science Hall, and Miss Sabin was there for the laying of the cornerstone. Within the new cornerstone was placed a copper box filled with items from that era. Here's a list of what was placed in that box. The building was designed by the architecture firm Van Ryn and Dejelic, and ground was broken on August 10th. The building was completed in September of 1928. Sabin Hall was the biggest building yet on campus, and was built at an estimated cost of $320,000. On the first floor of Sabin, there was a large lecture hall named Eleanor Pillsbury Hall, in memory of the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Cyrus H.K. Curtis, who contributed $50,000 toward the building. Sabin Hall had many laboratories, including general biology, bacteriology, experimental psychology, general chemistry, and physical science. The Department of Home Economics held most of its classes in Sabin Hall. The courses in food and nutrition, and in the social and economic problems of the home, were given at Sabin Hall. Kimberly Hall, the old home economics building, housed the courses in clothing and textiles. During the 50s, Kimberly Hall was turned into a student union building. A cafeteria for city students and a dining room for faculty members were added, as well as the Hawthorne Lounge in the basement. In 1935, Milwaukee-Downer Seminary merged with the Lake School for Girls. In doing this, the seminary enlarged its academic program to include all years from kindergarten through high school. The younger students were taught in a new building, which was completed in 1936. The building was decorated with animals, flowers, and inspirational quotes to appeal more to the children.
We're here at what used to be one of the entrances to Garland Pierce. And one of the things that's interesting about this one is the inscription above that reads, "Get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding." Also, it's interesting to note that there's birds on either side. What looks to be either a flamingo or a pelican, I'm not quite sure, and an owl, which of course is appropriate. And it's the kind of thing you probably just wouldn't see much in modern architecture. So it is kind of an unusual flavor specific to this part of the older campus.
Nowadays, the building houses UWM's Center for Student Experience and Talent.
My name is Lori Marks, and I am the Executive Director of the Center for Student Experience and Talent. So this is a much older building, which comes with its challenges, but it also comes with a lot of like historic beauty, right? Like the floors in this building are beautiful. The doors in this building are beautiful. The sunlight in this building is beautiful. Tall ceilings. So all these things are just, I think they're just like common for old buildings. And, you know, I'm lucky enough to be in a building that has those things.
So what are your like favorite parts of this building?
I think definitely the windows. There's just really big, beautiful windows in this building. So I love that. I also love the charm of this building. So every time I walk through the front door of this building, I always smile because when you walk in, carved into the archway of the walkway, it says, "Know thyself." And that's just such a classic old university building thing to do, is to put like a bit of wisdom on a doorway when you're going to walk into it. And it's just a really cool carving of a message that is great to have someone see every day. So just little things like that I love about this building. There's just kind of like these interesting stained glass windows when you walk in. I'm having trouble thinking what they are. I think one of them is a bird. Actually, my wife works here too. And she works in Peck School of the Arts. And I had never noticed those little stained glass panes the first couple of months I was here. Oftentimes I come in the back door because I ride my bike every day. But we came in the front and she noticed those stained glass windows right away. And she's like, "Oh my God, look at these amazing windows." And I was like, "Oh, I just never noticed those." So yeah, there's like these tiny panes that have like pictured stained glass. And it's just, again, it's a great entrance to walk into every day.
So do you know anything about the like renovations this building went through?
Well, I know that the building has been numerous things. I believe it was an art museum at one time, and then it was the university's welcome center. And through the process of those shifting uses, there was some changes made. And there's sort of remnants of both of those prior uses. You can kind of see on the doors of the career closet some etching that I can't remember if it says like, "Don't touch the artwork," or something. Like it makes reference that would make you believe that this was at one time an art museum. And it looks like it was like someone tried to take it off, but it's still there like a little bit.
Longtime benefactor of the college, Miss Alice Chapman, passed away in the 1930s and bequeathed $1 million to the college to be used for the construction of a library or other needed building. The college's collection had grown to a considerable size, and many books were being stored in the basements or separated into departmental libraries spread out across campus. Due to the value of the collection, it was deemed unsafe to house them in a non-fireproof building. Mr. Charles Collins of the firm Allen Collins and Willis was selected as the architect. When the construction of the new library began, the current collection had 33,500 bound volumes and 13,700 periodicals. The new library was completed in 1936, and it had more than enough space, being able to accommodate 125,000 volumes. It was named Chapman Hall in memory of Alice Chapman. When the books were moved to Chapman Hall, Green Hall was redecorated and furnished to be used as a lounge for teas, yearbook photos, and lectures. According to an article in the school newspaper in April of 1936, the design of the new library building is the result of study as to what the users of the library need for their convenience at various times during the college year. For those using reserve books, the largest and loftiest room in the building has been provided in which to study. Proper light, comfortable chairs, and tables are to be the chief considerations in planning its arrangements. We hope, since there will be plenty of other places in which to talk, that public opinion will enforce quiet in this room. Today, the reserve room is called the Regents' Room, and it's used for large meetings with the UW System Board of Regents. The reserve books themselves will be kept in a permanent collection back of the lobby desk, so that the noise of obtaining them will be confined to the lobby. These ornate wooden benches are original pieces from the lobby of the Chapman Library. For those looking up isolated facts, statistics, and questions of various kinds, a reference room adjoining the lobby has been provided. Around the wall will be encyclopedias and quotation books. A picture file, pamphlet file, maps, and atlases will also be accessible from the reference room. For topics, the stacks as a whole are to be available to the student, something ordinarily possible to graduate students only. With carrels besides the books themselves, one can sit down quietly alone and use as many books as one needs without carrying them long distances. In the tower is to be a music schoolroom with a piano, so that the student will be better able to choose the piece of music desired. Nowadays, that room is used as a meeting room, although it's not used that often because of its lack of technology. The jewel of Chapman Hall was the teakwood room on the second floor. Despite its unassuming location, the room has a complex and layered history spanning 3 different continents. The story of the teakwood room begins with Timothy Appleton Chapman and his daughter Alice Chapman attending the Chicago World's Fair of 1892, when they saw a display from designer Lockwood DeForest from New York. DeForest had lived in India for several years, establishing Ahmedabad Wood Carving Company, which specialized in hand-carved teakwood from East India. Unlike the usual highly polished black teakwood, these pieces were in their natural color, a warm cinnamon brown. The Chapman family commissioned DeForest to design the music room for their Milwaukee home on Cass Street, including wall panelings, arches, pillars, even carved cabinets, tables, and chairs. Frequent visitors included students from Milwaukee-Downer College, young musicians, artists, writers, and teachers, but none enjoyed the warmth of Miss Chapman's hospitality more than Miss Sabin, president of Downer, and her successor, Miss Lucia R. Briggs. When Miss Chapman passed, she provided for a specially built wing within the Chapman Library, which she bequeathed to the college. This wing would house the complete teakwood room and its treasures. Many people came to visit Milwaukee-Downer College to see the new teakwood room installed in Chapman Library. Kamal and Imkar visited the Milwaukee-Downer College to observe the occupational therapy department in preparation for founding an occupational therapy school in India. During her visit, she was enamored by the teakwood room and how it captured India's beauty. But she felt one thing was out of place: the painting of a Wisconsin landscape above the mantel of the fireplace. She asked and was promptly given permission to replace it. Drawing a hasty sketch of the fireplace, she recorded its dimensions, then outlined a picture above it. Back home, she commissioned an outstanding Indian artist, Narayan Bendre, to do a painting of Saraswati, the Hindu goddess of poetry, music, and wisdom. Within months, the painting arrived, and the goddess took her place above the mantel in the teakwood room. The painting depicts Saraswati sitting on a lotus leaf while playing a sitar. Directly connected to the teakwood room was the comparably beautiful oak room. This is what the oak room looks like today. In the student newspaper in March of 1938, many students published their thoughts on the new library. One student, Lois Parsons, wrote this: "Several hundred feet to the west of McLaren Hall looms the fulfillment of a great dream, our new library. From the time I opened its double doors, I had a variety of feelings. A turn up the spacious stairway brings the richness of teakwood carvings and oriental rugs. Especially appreciated is the quietude of the stacks. A bliss of solitude interrupted only by the casual clicking of light switches on the floor below, or the raucous buzzing of the electric bell that brings one back to the reality of classes." Beginning in 1947, there was an ominous decline in student enrollment at Milwaukee-Downer College. Starting in 1952, increasing student enrollments at UWM caused them to seek additional space for academic buildings, dormitories, and parking. UWM purchased the seminary property in 1959 for $1,550,000, which included Chapman Hall, Vogel Hall, and the kindergarten building. Chapman Hall was renamed Pierce Hall after Carroll G. Pierce, who was president of the Milwaukee State Teachers College from 1913 to 1923. The kindergarten was renamed Vogel Hall, and Vogel Hall was renamed Garland Hall after Pulitzer Prize-winning author Hamlin Garland. While Milwaukee-Downer College was facing a decline in student enrollment, there were still plans to build several new buildings. According to an article in the school newspaper on February 19th of 1960, the Board of Trustees of Milwaukee-Downer College at its meeting December 18th voted to earmark the $550,000 realized from the sale of the seminary toward a new Commons Union building, and authorized the administration to proceed with plans for its erection. Initial drawings prepared by the firm of Eschweiler and Eschweiler Architects incorporate suggestions of the faculty, staff, and students, and have been designed to harmonize with the architecture of the existing 14 buildings. The student union will fit into the gently sloping contour of the campus to the north and east of Chapman Memorial Library. It will have entrances on the west, south, and from the terrace on the northeast. The upper level of the Commons Union will include a lobby, information desk, telephones, check room, and washrooms. A main dining room with a capacity of 700 will be adjoined by smaller private dining rooms with adjustable partitioning walls and a large central lounge separated by movable glass partitions. The lower level will include a snack bar, bookstore, recreation and meeting rooms for all students, together with special city student facilities including study, rest area, locker rooms, and kitchenette. This building was never built. According to another article in the school newspaper on April 13th of 1961. As the Downer dial goes to press, the sound of hammers and saws is being heard on the campus. The noises are originating from the infirmary area and Johnston Hall. The ground is being cleared east of the infirmary for construction of the health center to be completed next fall. Its horizontal design is in line with the spreading trees soon to be budding in Hawthorne Den, and the architecture harmonizes with the plans for the Commons Union building to be erected later. A red brick exterior will complement Chapman Memorial Library and the older buildings on campus. Highlighting the new health center will be an enlarged 12-bed capacity consisting of 2 private rooms, 4 double rooms, and day room and 1 isolation room. Each room will have a private or a connecting bath. The health center will contain all new furnishings, including a fully equipped kitchen with sterilizing facilities. Adjoining the kitchen will be a dining room for the nearly well patients. Living quarters for the nurse and her assistant will be provided in the center. This building would become the Norris Health Center, which was the last building built by Milwaukee-Downer College. It was completed in 1961. When UWM acquired it, they named it after the late Robert E. Norris, UWM's first Dean of Student Affairs. According to another article in the school newspaper on April 26th of 1962, a look into Downer's future reveals exciting things to come. This is especially true of the future building plans. The first major proposed building is a residence hall with an eventual capacity of 300. This building is designed to be built in 2 stages, retaining a unity of structure in both stages, and providing in the end an impressive fully developed unit which will in actuality be 3 residence halls in one. The proposed residence hall will be a 3-story structure, similar in style to our new health center, and will be situated behind Chapman Memorial Library with an entrance driveway on East Hartford Avenue. The interior code calls for spacious living rooms for each of the 3 halls plus a lobby near the single main entrance, which is shared by the 3 halls or wings of the building. There are also rooms designated for study, typing, pressing and drip drying, smoking, and storing extra clothes and hand luggage. A men's restroom is conveniently close to the lobby. The north front wing of the building will have a basement in which there are maids and janitors' rooms, laundry facilities, and a large room of undesignated purpose. A craft room or recreation room are possibilities. We as future alumni will be sharing financially in making the construction of the new residence hall a reality. The estimated cost of the building is $1 million. It should be a pleasure for Downer students to look forward to the prospect of seeing Downer grow in the wake of the expected enrollment boom. The foresight of our administration and all concerned parties is to be commended. However, that expected enrollment boom would never come. 2 members of the Downer Board of Trustees were also on the Board of Trustees for Lawrence College in Appleton, and they alerted the Lawrence Board of Downer's predicament and possible interest in merging. On October 22, 1963 at 10:30 a.m., Charles W. Stone, the chairman of the Downer Board of Trustees, assembled the students and faculty in Merrill Hall and read the following statement. We have asked you to gather here at this time so that I may announce on behalf of the trustees a historic decision for the future of Milwaukee-Downer College. The trustees of Milwaukee-Downer College and of Lawrence College have agreed to join together in the establishment of Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin. You students who elect to continue your education next fall as members of the Downer College of Lawrence University will retain your academic standing as it would have been if this consolidation were not taking place. You members of the faculty and administration will be offered the opportunity to continue your work with Lawrence University with full protection of the rights to which you are entitled as members of the faculty and administration of Milwaukee-Downer College. I wish further to announce that this campus has been offered for sale to the University of Wisconsin for $10 million to permit expansion of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I have every reason to believe that this offer will be accepted. If it is, occupancy of the campus is proposed to take place as soon as practicable after commencement in June 1964. In the meantime, I want you to know that to the greatest extent possible we will take into consideration the personal interests of the students, alumni, faculty, and administrations of both colleges in bringing them together into what I firmly believe will be one of the greatest private educational institutions of the country. The president of Lawrence College, Curtis Tarr, had this to say about the merger. The total of Milwaukee-Downer College and Lawrence College will be greater than the sum of the two parts. The creation of Lawrence University through the blending of students, faculty, alumni, administrative personnel, trustees, assets, and reputations for academic excellence will strengthen and expand educational commitments which could not have been undertaken by either institution acting independently. According to another article in the school newspaper, on November 7, 1963, Mr. Stone commented on the merger by saying, "Even if we had increased the enrollment to 500 to 600, we would have been faced with a double problem. We must remember that when Downer's enrollment was at the 500 level earlier, 60% were city students. Increased registration in the future would necessitate the construction of a new dormitory. This would in turn create the need for the initiation of a building fund campaign. This campaign would most likely be unsuccessful in light of the pressure imposed upon us by UWM. We would have little support, and furthermore, the campus would become capsulated, completely surrounded by UWM." To familiarize Downer girls with the Lawrence College, a weekend was scheduled for them to visit. According to an article in the Lawrence School newspaper on February 7, 1964, Downer Weekend, under the direction of SEC, will take place on the Lawrence campus on Saturday and Sunday, February 22nd to the 23rd. The purpose of this weekend is to acquaint Downer girls with Lawrence College. During this weekend, the Downer girls will live in the dorms. Each Downerite will have an official Lawrence hostess. Approximately 35,700 books were added to the Lawrence Library. Some of these were considered to be rare books and are now located in the Milwaukee-Downer Room in the Lawrence Seeley G. Mudd Library. 40,000 duplicate books were later given to the Library of Cuttington University in Liberia. According to an article in the Downer School newspaper on May 28th of 1964, the Associated Colleges of the Midwest have purchased these volumes through a grant from the Ford Foundation. These books will go to the Library of Cuttington College in Liberia, a college now possessing only 8,000 volumes. The total number of books coming from Downer will exceed the present total of all Liberian college libraries. UWM also bid for the collection, but it was overwhelmingly topped by the ACMW offer. According to another article in the Lawrence School newspaper on October 25, 1963, Lawrence has agreed to take the Chapman Library's 72,200 volumes, which include 12,500 bound periodicals. However, no stipulation as yet has been disclosed concerning the teakwood room, traditional Downer furniture and tapestries which the students consider a significant part of their school. Expressing the general feeling of the student body, one Downer student stated, "I would rather take the teakwood room with us to Lawrence than leave it for UWM, even if this means it has to be housed in some shack." According to another article in the Downer School newspaper on November 27, 1963, although many of the details of what is to go with us to Lawrence have not yet been worked out, it has been ascertained that the teakwood room is to be installed in a women's dormitory called Downer Hall, which will be built at some time in the misty future. Miss Chester, trustee and niece of Miss Chapman, believes that the transfer of the room to Appleton would be in accordance with Miss Chapman's wishes. An architect has been consulted and has confirmed the feasibility of moving and instituting the room in the dorm where it will probably serve as a formal parlor. As a niece of Miss Chapman and her successor on the Downer Board of Trustees, with continuing membership on the Lawrence University Board, the preservation of the teakwood room was of special concern to Miss William M. Chester. The building opened in 1968 and was named the Jason Downer Center. According to the Jason Downer Center dedication, in the Chapman Teakwood Room we've permanently installed on our campus the perpetual memory of the dedication to education of the Chapman family. According to an article in the Lawrence School newspaper on November 1st, 1968, sealed within a copper box in the cornerstone are current issues of Appleton and Milwaukee newspapers. A description of the menus served during the week at the center, including the menu for Saturday's luncheon for participants and guests, a student memory book published by Milwaukee-Downer at the time of the merger, and histories of Milwaukee-Downer College and its two predecessors, Milwaukee Female College, founded in 1851, and Downer College at Fox Lake, founded in 1855. This building was renovated in 2013 and is now called the Alice G. Chapman Hall. UWM turned the remaining room in Chapman Hall into the Chancellor's office. The sundial from Merrill Hall in Milwaukee was moved to the south side of Lawrence's main hall in 1975 by the Milwaukee-Downer class of 1932. Hawthorne Den has also been recreated near Coleman Hall. UWM purchased the remaining buildings and 43 acres of land on the Downer campus for $10 million in 1964. According to an article in the Downer School newspaper on November 27, 1963. Both Dr. Klatschke, the provost at the university, and Dr. Mangiamelli are deeply concerned with preserving the beauty of Milwaukee-Downer campus. Dr. Klatschke pointed out that there are two main problems under consideration at the present time. The space in the buildings themselves must be considered, and then the undeveloped campus area must be dealt with. Although Dr. Klatschke indicated that there were no finalized plans yet, he mentioned that it is probable that the present buildings would be ready for occupancy in the fall. He hopes that the dormitories will continue to be used as residences for students who do not live in Milwaukee. This would certainly ensure a minimum of change. Before the Lawrence-Downer merger, said Dr. Klatschke, we were thinking of constructing new dormitories, but now that won't be necessary. When UWM acquired the Downer buildings, a study was done in May of 1965 to record the current conditions of the buildings and make recommendations for their use. According to the report for Albert Hall, the remodeling costs, including fees and contingency, are $125,567. While the revised plumbing work would add 15 years of life, the revised mechanical system will only provide for 5. Any further usage of the mechanical system would require a complete abandonment of the present heating system and installation of a completely new layout. The cost would become prohibitive in relation to the usage of the building. The maximum life of 5 years is the governing factor for Albert Hall. In view of the excessive square foot cost of remodeling the building, it is recommended that it be taken out of service and demolished as soon as suitable quarters can be found for the occupying department. According to a UWM news release on July 13, 1966, the University of Wisconsin Board of Regents Wednesday in Madison approved a request to raise Albert Hall on the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee's campus after hearing a report that it would be too costly to repair the 60-year-old building. Albert Hall was used to house UWM's School of Social Welfare until it was demolished on August 5, 1970. The report for Kimberly Hall said that the fire escape was not up to code, and plumbing and electrical needed to be updated. If the work as called for in this report and on the proposed room finish schedule is completed, we could assume an added useful life of approximately 5 years. Like Albert Hall, any further usage of the building would demand a complete obliteration of the present heating system and extensive remodeling of the physical structure. As the building can be of service to the university for a time as temporary quarters for the journalism department, it would be our recommendation that the proposed work be carried out. After the expiration of the recommended time or before, the building should be demolished and other use made of the land upon which it is sited. Kimberly Hall was used to house UWM's journalism department until it was demolished in the summer of 1967. According to the report from McLaren Hall, the building shows the wear of its full-time occupancy. Its condition is somewhat deplorable. As the recommendations and summary will indicate, it is hoped that this particular building will not be used for any greater length of time, at least not for more than 3 years. When this observer stood in the 2 top corridors facing south, a noticeable easterly lean was apparent in the walls. The total cost of construction, plumbing, electrical, and heating and ventilating was estimated to be $161,100. The present condition of the plumbing and bath areas is such that only 6 months of life could be expected from them, and that with only extensive maintenance. The present wiring system presents a great hazard, as it is worn and passes through wood floor and wall sections with no protection except for wire covering, which is of doubtful value. The floor joists are exposed in much of the basement, and any short in the present wiring could be the start of a calamitous conflagration. It is our recommendation that McLaren Hall be abandoned after the 64-65 and not be reopened. This building should be demolished and the land used for better purpose. If this building is required by the university to serve as a temporary structure for housing students, then the suggested remodeling should be completed before any further use is made of it. However, a maximum use of 3 years should be set as the limit. Johnston and Holton were used as women's residence halls, and McLaren as a men's residence. The Downer College residence halls, with approximately 240 residents, were the site of the first food service operation. These facilities were used as residence halls until June of 1970, when Sandburg Hall opened. At that time, these buildings were turned over to the university for other uses, except McLaren, which was torn down.
Okay, so this is a map of Downer Women's College as it was designed. So you can see there, this was the Green Memorial Museum Stall Center. There was a hall here called Kimberly, and that's no longer exists. This is where the power station is now. All right, here's Sabin. The laundry room and boiler room no longer exists. Well, I guess it's an extension of the power plant that's here. And then this was Albert Hall, no longer exists. But what was great is you could walk from Holton Hall under a portico, no snow, to Albert Hall, to McLaren Hall, and then from McLaren Hall you could take a tunnel to Chapman Memorial Library. So McLaren Hall no longer exists, nor does Albert Hall, but this is where Endress is, right here, and then this is where the parking lot is.
In the midst of all this demolition, it was unclear what UWM planned to do with the rest of the Downer buildings. In a Milwaukee Journal article on February 17, 1974, L.O. Brink had this to say: "The Downer College buildings, together with the former seminary buildings, now Garland, Pierce, and Vogel halls, grouped around a semicircle to the south, create a homogeneous and meaningful space on campus. They successfully juxtapose the new buildings and plazas on campus. They bring with their style character of quality, and their siting a sense of continuity to the campus. They are an invaluable asset that must not be sacrificed for future pedestrian lookalikes, nor at the altar of today's economics. How long can we go on blindly obliterating our architectural past? Why will we never understand the values we have destroyed with such arrogance springing from our ignorance?"
They wanted to destroy these buildings, want to tear them down and replace them. And the alumni of the college, the women of Downer College, had these places all declared National Historic buildings, mostly because Eschweiler, who was a very famous, people are familiar with his prints, but he also was an architect. That was his big thing, as the architect. And he designed these buildings. You can see it in the stairwells or the water breaks or some of the other interesting features he has going on in the building. And they declared it National Historic, so it couldn't be torn down. It can be renovated.
According to a UWM news release on November 1st, 1974, the Commission had designated the Milwaukee-Downer Buildings UWM campus as historical buildings at its meeting in 1973. As you know, the university was unable to formally accept this honor a year ago. At that time, the university had not made up its collective mind about preserving these buildings. We had not yet made our analysis of their historical significance, and we had not yet completed necessary engineering and architectural studies. We had been made aware, notably by the Committee to Renovate the Downer Buildings, of the architectural interest which the buildings hold, of their historical significance, and of the character and feeling which they add to our campus. But we had to be very practical. As a state agency, we had to make certain that the buildings are sound enough to have a continued useful life, and that they can be renovated and maintained within economic reason. We now have assurance on those points from the consultants. In fact, their report suggests that it would be less costly to preserve the Downer buildings and remodel them than to construct new buildings in order to obtain the same amount of space. The University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee has made a firm decision to do all within its power to preserve these buildings, not only to preserve them, but to renovate them to a standard that will make them useful for another 75 years. As evidence of our commitment to this effort, we have requested of the Regents, the Governor, and Legislature $2.4 million in funding for the 1975 to 77 fiscal period with which to begin this effort. We hope that our central administration, the University of Wisconsin System Regents, and the state will approve our request, that they will agree with us. The Milwaukee-Downer buildings are historic jewels from the 19th century which need to be polished up in the 20th century so that we can continue to use and enjoy them now and far into the 21st century. Thank you again for this honor. Brielmeier, Scherer, and Scherer were selected for the renovation based on their expertise in Perpendicular Gothic and church architecture. The Milwaukee Landmark plaque would be mounted ceremonially on Merrill Hall May 1, 1976. The completion of Holton Hall, first building to be renovated, was celebrated at a rededication ceremony on May 9, 1981. As for Green Hall, it was used as an art history museum. According to a UWM news release on October 28, 1972, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee will open its new art history museum in mid-November in the renovated Green Hall, a vaulted medieval-style building at North Downer and East Newport Avenue. The museum will house the prestigious collection of Greek and Russian icons and Eastern and Western European liturgical objects loaned to UWM by the family of Charles Bowles Rogers, New York. Contemporary and functional exhibition panels have been installed along the museum's east and west interior walls. The vaulted ceiling has been retained. To preserve the integrity of the exterior, the double-arched windows have been left untouched, although they are blocked from the inside. Viewers of the collection will discover icons dating from the 14th through the 19th centuries, Greek, Russian, and Byzantine liturgical objects from the 6th through the 12th centuries, with 3 from the 18th and 2 Italian 13th century Madonnas in wood. Monstrances, chalices, and reliquaries date from the 13th through the 19th centuries. Full-scale construction on the other 3 Downer College buildings would not be completed until 1982, and completion of the 3 seminary building renovations took until 1985.
My name is Bobby Tanzillo, and I am the senior editor and writer at onmilwaukee.com, which is a daily online city magazine. And I write mostly about history and architecture and sort of other stuff, beer, whiskey, a little bit of everything. Those were Downer College. It was an early women's college in the state. And then across was the Teachers College, which is now Mitchell Hall. Then ultimately they merged in the late 50s, early 60s to become UWM. And those buildings over there, I mean, some of them are designed by different architects and stuff, but they're very sort of homogeneous looking collection of buildings. And that's really, I mean, if you look at that, you can really see a beautiful kind of original kind of small college campus vibe, which is nice. I mean, the UWM has a campus, like definitely a campus with borders, sort of, and so does Marquette. But that would have been the first in the city to really have that kind of nice little college vibe. And it was, I mean, it would have been, along with the Teachers College, which was for women as well. It's an important part of Milwaukee's, women's history, too. So it's kind of nice that they've all survived and that UWM has kept them in this, especially when you see how many of the buildings on campus have come down to be replaced. Hopefully those will never go. Right, and all those buildings, right, I mean, nowadays, I mean, they're beautiful from the outside, but inside, most of the original interior stuff is gone. I mean, there's still some woodwork and things, and I think Green Hall is probably the only one that really looks sort of like it looked at the time, that it was built. There are other ones inside have all changed so much, and some of them, everything was completely erased. But I think Johnston still has some woodwork in it. So some of them still have a little bit, but really they've changed a lot over the years. You go in there and it's all just like linoleum floors and it's 80s-ified. Which, at the time was, I'm glad they didn't tear them down. I'd rather they do that than tear them down. But it was a shame they didn't sort of strive to keep a little bit more of the inside as much as they cared about keeping the outside.
Yeah, there were a couple.
Being so old, it's hard to not have a building this historic without having a few ghost stories. In Johnson Hall in particular, as it was a residence hall, there have been reports of a sighting of a woman in all white walking down this very stairwell that we are currently in. There have been reports that there was a death on the campus during its time as the Downer-Milwaukee College as a women's seminary. And people report her walking through them, walking down the stairwell.
The only other thing unique about the building is the supposed ghost of Merrill Hall. In the maybe 1905, 1906, somewhere in that range, supposedly, one of the nursing students committed suicide in the top floor of the dorm. People have told me they've looked for the newspaper accounts and it doesn't appear. And then, of course, the conspiracy is, of course, the college kept it quiet. Didn't allow. Some of the graduate students over years, because mostly graduate students on that floor, have said they've heard rattling or seen a couple of seats that they've seen the ghost. Although I tend to think the noise of rats and other vermin over the years of maybe fanciful imaginations, but that's one of the kind of legends that lives on, which it's not provable, not kind of a classic X-Files. You can't really prove it, so you have to choose to believe it or choose to not believe it. If there is a ghost, I haven't seen it. I'm not looking for a ghost. I think the ghost stories more relate to right now. For cost savings, they have the lights turn off when nobody is using the hallways. So you can be teaching in a class at night, particularly, and all the lights are off in the hallways. So you come on and you have to wave your arms and shout in the dark to try to get the lights to turn on.
Probably the most popular ghost in Merrill and Johnston Halls is the ghost cat. The ghost cat has been seen by graduate students, faculty members, and undergraduate students alike, and is reported to appear kind of, at times of the school day where people are alone and they see a random cat that looks pretty real. So some people have speculated that it has actual real cat in the building, although I sure hope it's not a real cat. But it is it's probably one of the oldest ghost sightings that we have in the building. No one really knows exactly when they started seeing the ghost cat, or whether it was, a pet of a resident of this building at some point. They just know it showed up, and every once in a while you'll see a cat rounding the corner and, maybe get spooked a little bit. They said it's a black short-haired cat. Okay. So, very stereotypical kind of haunted, spooky cat, which maybe might be more psychological, but as far as people know, it is pretty friendly. And if I could just befriend that ghost cat, that it could take care of the mice and maybe the ghost mice that often come in this building because it's being so old, that would be great.
I've also heard about a ghost cat.
That rumor came later. I've heard, that rumor comes about because in theory, the graduate students had a cat that, I think they'd read perhaps too much Edgar Allan Poe, and the cat had gotten lost or was hunting mice and got trapped in one of the rooms. The fourth floor used to have hidden rooms because they were journalism and mass comm back then did photography, where they had dark rooms. So of course you have rooms that have no windows, and they're kind of hidden. There's light don't come in, and kind of half guarded. So there's and of course there's no door to the outside.
I have told people that I saw a ghost in the Green Museum, and can I tell you? Okay, I'll tell you a story. So I worked in the Green Museum, and usually I was by myself. And I'd say 89% of the time I was by myself in the building. And I used to keep the front door locked because it was Jewish studies, and at the time there was some tension, and I just didn't want some rando coming in and deciding that they were going to take me out to, for whatever reason. And I thought, I'm just the innocent bystander working in this building. So the door's locked. And if you wanted to come in, you knock on the door and I could open it. So I'm just working away, and I see out of the corner of my eye someone like it looked like someone was walking past the office that I was working at. And I thought, well, that's really weird. So I get up and I walk out and I look around and I go upstairs, and there's no one there. And then I come back and sit down, and a couple of days later, again, I just sort of something came down, and I got this glimpse of an individual. To me, it looked like a man, about between 5'9", 5'10", not a big guy, wearing he had a high starch collar, and he was wearing a black suit. And I thought, okay, right. So I have that. That's happening in this building. And, but I would see him just every once in a while. And then if I'm going upstairs, it was like your peripheral vision, you just see something and you look and nothing would be there. And you go, what is that? And getting my eyes checked. Did I have floaters? Was I imagining things? So then I get a student. She was a grad student. She was a PhD grad student, and she was helping me at the Stull Center. And she worked upstairs and I worked downstairs. And one day she comes downstairs and she's white like a sheet. And she goes, I saw someone. And I had never told her that I had seen someone, because it sounds crazy. So Shelley comes down, she goes, I saw someone. And I said, okay, what did you see? What did you see? And so she began to describe the same guy I saw. Okay. So then I'm like, okay, well, now I have at least some confirmation. Never told her ever that. And I said, I've seen that same person. And we were like, oh my God. And so after that, we were always on the lookout for this individual. But it would just be these brief. So here's the other thing. When we go to the building, I'll show you. In the building, we do not have an elevator. We have something called a chair lift, because if we had an elevator, they would have had to have dug deeper. All right. So we have a chair lift. And in order to use the chair lift, you get in and you have to push a button all the time to go up or to come back down. You can't just push the button, and it's not like an elevator. Okay. So I'm in there by myself, and all of a sudden, the chairlift comes down. I'm in the first floor. The chairlift is on the second floor. It comes down, stops, and then the door opens. Now, at this point, I'm like, oh my God, who's here? Because I'm all alone. And I get up and I walk out of my office to where the chairlift, and the door opens. There's no one there. So I call the elevator guys, Wolf and Huey, and they both retired. And I called them and I said, hey, is it possible for the chairlift to move on its own? Absolutely not. I said, come on, can it just fall? No, absolutely not. The only way you can operate that is with the button pushing. And I said, well, it's done its thing. It did it all by itself. And they just thought I was crazy. So I leave Jewish studies. They hire someone to replace me. And she calls me and she says, oh my God, she had seen the guy. She described him exactly the way I did. but I didn't tell her the place was haunted. She sees him, and not only does she see him, she is able to. She had a recording of the door of the chairlift doing exactly what it did to me. And Judy Woods, she no longer works here, but I could call her and say, "Do you still have that video?" Very cool. And since that time, I know they've, then COVID hit, and I have, sort of not really kept in touch with the subsequent people that have worked in that building. But, and the director and the assistant director, Joel and Rachel, I don't know if they've ever had the same experience I've had. So, that's my ghost story. So, I'm sure someone who's like a paranormal ghostbuster can probably say, what you saw was a shadow of this and that and the other thing. That's fine. I mean, but who knows? I mean, is there energy that we can't, why is that person so, I think it's the architect. I don't know, maybe it's Mr. Green. I don't know who it is. Checking out he's probably wondering where all his fossils are. Maybe what we should do is just do like a seance and say, okay, your fossils are now down in Lapham. Here's a map. Okay, go to Lapham. And then he'd probably be very happy.
So is there any actual evidence of these buildings being haunted? In an article written by the UWM Post and published on December 1st, 1967, they interviewed Charles Talbot Sheldon, a local historian at the time. According to Sheldon, the area just behind the Chapman Memorial Library, where the new Sandberg residence halls will be built, was once a makeshift graveyard for Milwaukee area smallpox victims. In 1892, a smallpox epidemic hit the city of Milwaukee. A temporary isolation hospital headed by Dr. Gilbert Seaman was built on the Milwaukee-Downer College campus. The Board of Health sent infected victims there for treatment. Because of the rapid spread of the disease and the lack of proper medical care at the time, many of the patients sent to the hospital died there. He said at the time it was built, no one had any idea what the structure was because the city wanted to keep its existence secret in order to avoid panic. The building, looking much like a wooden army barracks, was used for 1 year until the threat of smallpox had vanished. After the threat had passed, the building was burned down to prevent recontamination. The only actual record of death on Milwaukee-Downer's campus centered around two of the janitors of Kimberly Hall. One was Leonard Nelson, whom the co-eds knew as Leo. The other was Gustav Peterson, known as Gust. On June 7, 1933, Nelson and 3 friends were returning intoxicated from a party at Waukesha Beach around 11 p.m. when Nelson lost control of his car and it plunged into a ditch 5 miles west of Waukesha on Highway 30. 2 of the passengers were thrown from the rumble seat onto the highway. Both suffered skull fractures that would prove fatal. The 3 passengers were taken to Waukesha Municipal Hospital by Waukesha County Sheriff Arthur Moran. Nelson, who was uninjured, was told to remain at the scene, but instead, Nelson convinced some bystanders to help him get the car out of the ditch, saying that he would follow them to the hospital. Instead, he went to a Brookfield farm where he stashed the car. He borrowed another car from a friend, Joseph Liu, who worked there as a hired hand. When Moran returned and found Nelson missing, he notified Milwaukee police and 2 detectives were dispatched to Kimberly Hall. When they reached Nelson's 3rd-floor room, they saw the body of a man in the bathroom just off the bedroom. They immediately summoned an ambulance. While the body was being taken away, the detectives went to the room of another janitor, Klaus Nyberg, who lived in another building. "Leonard, he was just here," he said. "He gave me his purse and watch. He said he had a bad accident in a fight with Gust and maybe killed him." They were still questioning Nyberg when they heard a gun report. Detectives and police began to search the campus, their flashlights cutting through the night into bushes and dark corners. At about 2 a.m., they heard another shot. They found Nelson lying next to a fence at Maryland and Hartford, a bullet lodged in his right temple. Police said the gun which belonged to Peterson probably discharged accidentally in the struggle. Police theorized that the first shot heard by detectives was fired accidentally as Nelson sought escape and later he turned the gun on himself. There was also the time when ghost hunters visited UWM. According to an article written by the UWM Post on February 7, 1975, Penny South was a soothsayer who read fortunes on WQFM during the mid-1970s. She visited UWM on February 3, 1975, with a complete entourage including 2 tape recorders and a personal advertising agent. The purpose of her visit was to see what exists in the form of electromagnetic energy within the dated walls of the Downer buildings, or as laymen might say, to find out if they are haunted. South was going to act primarily as a guide or medium for her brother, Tom Massari, who would be responsible for picking up the vibrations. When asked what they were looking for, South replied, basically a lot of collective energy that relates to the past. Upon entering Johnston Hall, which used to serve as a dormitory for Downer College, signs of apprehension began to appear on the faces of South and her brother. The main event of the evening took place in room 371 of Johnston Hall. South and her brother spoke of experiencing actual physical pain in their solar plexus while walking towards the room. South repeatedly described Johnston Hall from what she could see as being a dreaded place to be in those days, where corrective or disciplinary punishment was carried out. South and her brother concluded that someone in the early 1900s was beaten or clubbed to death in the closet of the old dorm room 371 in Johnston Hall. She could see a lot of women being beaten up, students that were being hurt by other students. She described what she saw as a nightmare. Even with all the ghost stories and creepy happenings in the Downer buildings, staff members can't help but love them.
And what's it like for you working in the Downer buildings?
Well, I think there's a lot of history here. This actually, where we're sitting, was Helen Sabin's, this was her sitting room. So this was actually, all of this was, she lived here. Holton was the dorms for the Downers Women's College. So, if we went down the hallway, you'd see there's a dining room, but it's now our meeting room. And so, I feel a responsibility to make sure that things are cared for and that, some of the history is preserved. I mean, I found this painting of her and it was in a dark hallway. And I thought, well, she needs to come back here. I will say, behind me, believe it or not, that little teeny desk is from the Downer Women's College. And I'm sorry it looks like a mess, but can you imagine that 2 people sat there and they have ink wells there? So so when people complain about the desks we have here at UWM, imagine sitting in a little chair right next to someone and bumping arms. But here's a nice story. We have in a room, it's a file room, we have the original dining table for the Downer College. I mean, it's 90 inches long and it has leaves, so it would spread out. And our new Associate Dean of Natural Science is looking to sort of change up her office. And so we went in there and she goes, "This is great. I want this for my conference table." So now we're repurposing it. We're going to take it out of the file room and we have all the chairs that go with it. I mean, honestly, we have chairs for 15, 20 people. So she's not going to have that many people in her office, but she now has all the chairs that match this huge 90-inch long table. A historical society sent me some pictures of graduates from 1906. And so I have plans to blow those up and then hang those downstairs in the main meeting area where on the first floor of Holton, that's where all the advisors are, and that's where a lot of new students come in, so that they get a sense of the history here. The kids come here, and they're students, but they have no idea that there's a history here. So, I try to impart some of the history.
A lot of the design of this whole complex was built for It was built as kind of a dorm complex in the 1890, what I call 1890s, 1900. And Eschweiler had a desire to kind of build these complex buildings that would have hidden spaces or spaces where that would not be frequently traveled. That would be wonderful for the occupants because it gave them a more homey, like, for example, the window seats, the radiators window seats, which in the winter, of course, are warm and people can sit and look out the window, and they're made, and they're kind of a bench, and they're really nice. And then he had all sorts of other little places like that where, things that would be, by modern standards, inconvenient or not efficient, but they were designed to be more homey, more friendly to human habitation kind of thing. And so the designs, every so often you come across like, oh, why did they do that? Like, for example, one of the things that he did, which when you connect Holton and Merrill, the floors are offset. So like there's 7 or 8 stairs going down. And it used to be there was a door there. So it kind of kept people from going from the classroom into the dorm area. So, it gave a kind of privacy, if you will, to each of the dorms separated from that. I mean, today it makes no sense at all because there's not dorms and you've got this, instead of walking down the hallway, but you can also tell that they were not there was no American Disability Act because the stuff is not at all compliant with, in terms of its, I mean, we retrofitted to make it compliant, but back then, I mean, it would not have been at all compliant with ADA expectations. And some of the entrances to the building are overly ornate. In other words, we would not design today an ornate or entrance of that kind, or we wouldn't have little side rooms. We wouldn't have an ornate entrance like in Holton, and have side rooms where people could hold where people could go and meet with somebody and hold a private conversation with them. Now, of course, those are just offices. He was fascinated with spaces and with designs. And if you look up the stairways, and up, like, probably the best example is to go to the bottom of the stairway here and look up the stairway. And has kind of this repeating pattern going off into space, which, he's very familiar. It's what the prints are all about. So he has this kind of notion of transformative of spaces being kind of lost and spaces being changing as you go through. I mean, we have a functional sundial, for example, on the front of the building, which is kind of an interesting, and it's got this kind of castle, effect, which, it's not a castle, and the doors are these big wooden doors that swing out, which swing, and it's like, so you have this kind of English castle effect, which is kind of a weird sort of way. And then, the water spouts with dragons and the gargoyles and all the other little things that would be kind of ornate, but make it a little different from other buildings of its kind. He didn't design a lot of buildings in the Midwest. I mean, he did these buildings, also the stuff that we inherited out by Fredert. He actually designed those brick buildings too, which is really kind of interesting that we actually got those as well. But it's just a very interesting way of him wanting to seek a different use of space. To some extent, he reminds me a lot of Frank Lloyd Wright and that Prairie Home, where you want to have a very functional space. But for him, the functionality wasn't the same as Wright focused on efficiency for functionality, and Wright focused on more functionality for kind of using space for multiple purposes and allowing people to hide off in little nooks and crannies. I think Eschweiler, cats would have loved him, because of the way he designed space. A cat would have loved it because they could go to all these little interesting areas.
I absolutely love working in the Downer buildings. Personally, and maybe I'm biased, but I think that these are the most beautiful buildings on campus. I feel like every day I'm coming into work, going into a castle, and it really creates an environment where it feels collegiate, where it feels grand and prestigious. And I appreciate the subtle details that I see every day in the architecture. And, you know, every week I'm here, I discover something new about the building that I didn't know about.
And so, I'll leave you with this poem written for the college yearbook by a student named Marion O'Neill. When college years have swiftly flown, and only there remains some pleasant recollections to bring them back again, then come to the place where the hawthorn trees burst with a cloud of glory, where every wall has 1,000 tales and every stone a story, where the horseshoe curves round the campus green, halls echo with laughter free, the place that is hallowed by friendships and time. Oh, come back to MDC.